In the autumn of 1812, Napoleon's Grande Armée stood before Moscow, a city already consumed by flames. The winter that followed was merciless, and the retreat would become a nightmare etched into history. This is that story. The air was thick with the acrid scent of smoke, mingling with the cold that seeped into bones. Horses neighed, and men shouted as Napoleon's soldiers pushed through the smouldering remains of Moscow's streets. Flames licked at the edges of buildings, casting eerie shadows across the cobblestones. The ground beneath their boots was soft from ash, each step a crunch of what had once been homes. Above, the sky was darkened by smoke, the stars hidden behind a veil of soot. The distant crackle of flames was a constant companion as soldiers trudged through the ruined city. The cold bit at their cheeks and fingers, each breath visible in the night air. Inside what had once been grand palaces, now only charred beams and shattered glass remained. The wind carried whispers of former opulence, mingling with the bitter reality of defeat. A lone horseman rode past, his silhouette stark against the smouldering horizon. Beneath the cold, the soldiers' boots crunch on remnants of what were once homes. The air is a mix of ash and frost, each breath a sharp sting in the lungs. A lone soldier pauses, staring at the smouldering husk of a church, its steeple now a blackened ruin reaching towards the dark sky. The wind whispers through the broken spires, carrying with it tales of what once was. In the distance, embers glow like dying stars against the cold earth. The wind howled through the skeletal remains of Moscow's buildings, carrying with it the faint scent of pine and burnt wood. Soldiers huddled around makeshift campfires, their faces gaunt in the flickering light. Each fire cast long shadows that danced along the charred walls. Above them, the sky was a deep indigo, unmarred by stars but thick with the smoke that lingered like a shroud. The ground beneath their feet was a carpet of ash and broken glass, each step a reminder of what had been lost. The night enveloped Moscow, a cloak of darkness over the smouldering ruins. Soldiers gathered around their meagre fires, shadows dancing on their faces as they spoke in hushed tones. A faint glow from distant embers flickered like ghostly lanterns, casting an eerie light across the desolate landscape. The cold air bit through layers of worn uniforms, and each breath left a trail of frost. In the distance, the occasional crackle of wood gave way to silence, a stark reminder of what once stood proud. The air was thick with ash, as soldiers wandered through what remained of Moscow's grand avenues. Each step echoed off the charred facades, the ground beneath their boots a mosaic of shattered glass and cinders. In the distance, an occasional ember glowed like a dying sun against the cold earth. The wind carried whispers of past opulence, now lost to flames and frost, each breath visible in the chill night air. The distant glow of embers cast an amber light over the frozen earth, illuminating the gaunt faces of soldiers huddled together for warmth. A thin layer of snow had settled on the ruins, a fragile blanket over shattered stones and blackened timbers. In the dim light, the sky appeared as a deep, unbroken grey, heavy with the promise of more cold to come. The air was sharp, each breath leaving a trail of frost in its wake. Amidst this desolation, an old soldier sat alone, his eyes fixed on the smouldering remnants of what once stood tall and proud. The wind carried the acrid scent of smoke as soldiers trudged through the ruins. A soldier paused by a broken fountain, its once gleaming marble now streaked with soot and ash. Around him, the ground was littered with fragments, glass, wood, and metal, all mute witnesses to the city's fall. The sky above was an oppressive grey, heavy with the threat of snow. Each step sank into the cold earth, a reminder of what had been lost. A soldier kicked at a pile of cinders, sending sparks into the air like dying stars. The ground was a mosaic of ash and broken glass, each step a crunch beneath his boots. Above, the sky was an oppressive grey, unmarred by even a single star. He could feel the cold seeping through his layers of uniforms, each breath leaving trails of frost in its wake. In the distance, another soldier huddled near a flickering ember, lost in the silent despair that hung over them all. The soldier's breath misted in the frigid air, each exhalation a cloud of white against the darkening sky. He clutched his rifle tighter, its metal cold and unforgiving. Around him, the city's remnants whispered tales of grandeur lost to flames and frost. A distant ember glowed like a forgotten eye, watching over the desolate scene. The ground was a crust of snow and ash, each step a crunch beneath his boots. The sky loomed heavy, a promise of more bitter cold. The soldier paused by a broken window frame, its glass long since shattered. The night air was thick with the scent of burnt wood and earth, each breath a sharp sting in his lungs. Around him, the city's ruins lay silent, a graveyard of blackened timbers and ash. A flickering ember caught his eye, casting eerie shadows on the cracked walls. He shivered, the cold seeping through his uniform, a constant reminder of their dire situation. The soldier's hands were numb, each movement a struggle against the biting cold. He leaned against what remained of a stone wall, its surface pockmarked by fire and frost. The air tasted of ash, every breath a sharp reminder of their dire circumstances. Nearby, a flickering ember cast eerie shadows on the ground, illuminating fragments of shattered glass and wood. The sky above was an unyielding grey heavy with the threat of more snow. The soldier's boots crunched on the frozen ground, each step a brittle sound in the stillness. He passed by what had once been a grand palace, now reduced to smouldering ruins. The air was thick with smoke and the scent of cold earth. A distant ember flickered like a forgotten candle, casting eerie shadows over the desolate landscape. His breath came in shallow gasps, each one a struggle against the bitter chill that seemed to seep into his bones. The soldier's gaze lingered on the smouldering remnants of what was once a bustling marketplace. The air hung heavy with the acrid scent of smoke and soot, each breath a painful reminder of their defeat. A distant ember flickered weakly, casting an eerie glow over the desolate scene. Snowflakes began to fall, settling softly on the blackened timbers and shattered glass. The cold was relentless, seeping into his bones with every passing moment. The soldier's fingers fumbled over the icy grip of his rifle, each movement a battle against the relentless cold. He walked through the smouldering remnants of Moscow, where the air hung thick with the scent of burnt wood and soot. Snowflakes began to fall, settling silently on the blackened timbers and shattered glass. The soldier's breath formed clouds in the air, each one dissipating into the frigid expanse. He huddled near a half-burned tree trunk, its charred remains still steaming from residual heat. The ground beneath his feet was a mosaic of ice and ash, crunching under the weight of his boots. Snowflakes drifted down like silent whispers, settling on his helmet and shoulders, turning his world into shades of grey and white. The sky above offered no warmth, its heavy canvas threatening more cold. The cold settled like an unyielding shroud over the soldier's heart. Each step through the snow sent a brittle crunch echoing into the stillness. He passed by what was once a bustling street, now a silent graveyard of blackened timbers and shattered glass. A half-burned tree trunk stood as a grim sentinel, its charred remains still steaming from residual heat. The sky above loomed heavy, an unyielding grey that promised no warmth. The soldier's gaze drifted to the horizon, where the sky met the earth in a murky grey haze. The snow had turned the ground into a treacherous expanse of ice and ash, each step a battle against the relentless cold. The distant flames still flickered, casting an eerie glow over the desolate cityscape. A howling wind cut through his thin uniform, seeping into every crevice, turning his world into a symphony of cold whispers. The soldier's ears rang with the distant crackle of burning buildings. Each step left a shallow imprint in the snow, which soon filled with melting ice and ash. He passed through what was once a crowded marketplace, now reduced to charred stalls and smouldering debris. A thin layer of snow covered the ground like a shroud, muffling sounds into ghostly whispers. The sky remained an unwavering grey, offering no hope of respite from the cold. The soldier's breath misted in the frigid air, each exhale a fleeting cloud. He moved through the city's ruins, where once vibrant streets were now silent paths of ash and ice. Each step crunched underfoot, a brittle symphony of destruction. A half-burned tree stood as a grim reminder, its charred remains still steaming faintly from residual heat. The sky above offered no warmth, only an unyielding grey canvas that promised more cold. The soldier's boots crunched through the snow, each step a battle against the frozen ground. He passed an abandoned carriage, its wheels caked in ice and ash, standing as a ghostly sentinel amidst the ruins. A howling wind carried the scent of smoke, mingling with the bitter cold that seeped into his bones. The distant flames flickered like restless spirits, casting eerie shadows over what was once a bustling marketplace. Each breath left trails of mist in the air, dissipating quickly into the frigid expanse. The soldier's fingers, numb and stiff, clutched at the frayed edges of his cloak. Each breath was a sharp intake of icy air that seemed to freeze in his lungs. He passed by an alleyway where the snow had piled up against the charred remains of shops. A stray dog padded silently behind him, its eyes glowing faintly under the grey sky. The wind carried whispers of smoke and ash, mingling with the bitter cold that seeped into every fibre of his being. The soldier's eyes scanned the desolate expanse, where once stood bustling streets now reduced to smouldering ruins. Each breath left trails of mist in the frigid air as he pushed through the silence. A stray dog padded behind him, its paws sinking into the snow that covered the ground like a thin shroud. The wind carried whispers of smoke and ash, mingling with the bitter cold that seeped into every fibre of his being. The distant flames flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows over the landscape. The soldier's breath misted in the cold air, each exhale a ghostly plume that dissolved into the grey sky. He trudged past what was once a thriving marketplace, now a field of ash and ice. A stray dog followed silently, its paws sinking into the snow like shadows. The distant flames flickered weakly, casting eerie light over the ruins. Each step brought the crunch of frozen earth underfoot, a mournful symphony of destruction. The howling wind carried the distant wail of a wolf. The soldier's path wound through what was once a bustling marketplace, now reduced to smouldering remnants and frozen ash. Each step crunched on the brittle ground, a mournful echo in the vast silence. A stray dog circled him, eyes gleaming with hunger under the grey sky. The air smelled of smoke and ice, mingling into a bitter perfume that clung to his clothes like a shroud. The soldier's senses were overwhelmed by the ruins around him. Each step echoed through the barren streets, a stark contrast to the silent howl of the wind. An abandoned carriage lay half buried in snow, its wheels frozen solid. A stray dog sniffed at the remnants of what was once a bakery, now nothing but charred timbers and ash. The distant flames flickered weakly, casting an eerie light over the desolate scene. Each breath was a struggle against the bitter cold that seeped into his bones. The soldier's gaze drifted to the horizon, where the last embers of Moscow still glowed. Each step through the ash-laden snow was a labour, his boots sinking into the crusty ground with a hollow crunch. A stray dog pressed close, its breath visible in the frigid air. The sky above was a deep grey, the clouds heavy with the threat of more snow. The distant flames cast flickering shadows over the ruins, their glow barely piercing the encroaching darkness. The soldier's fingers numb, he clutched a fragment of bread that crumbled at the touch. Each step through the snow was an effort, the ground crunching beneath his boots like brittle bones. A stray dog darted alongside him, its eyes reflecting the dying embers of distant fires. The air was thick with the acrid scent of smoke and cold earth. Above, the sky loomed heavy, a dark canvas against which the faint glow of flames cast long shadows across the desolate landscape. The soldier's breath came in ragged gasps as he trudged through the silent streets. Each step was a battle against the biting cold and the heavy snow. The distant flames cast an eerie light over the ruins, illuminating the skeletal remains of what once stood tall. A stray dog padded silently beside him, its eyes reflecting the dying embers. The air was thick with smoke, mingling with the scent of ice and ash, a bitter perfume that filled his lungs. The soldier's eyes locked onto the frozen mud, each step a struggle against the relentless cold. His breath hung in the air like wisps of smoke from an extinguished fire. A stray dog shadowed his movements, its paws sinking into the snow with soft thuds. Beyond the ruins, flames still danced, casting flickering shadows that twisted through the desolate streets. The air was a biting mix of ash and ice, each inhalation a sharp reminder of their dire circumstances. The soldier's senses were numbed by the relentless cold. He noticed the subtle crunch of snow underfoot, each step a slow torture. A stray dog padded silently beside him, its fur matted and dirty from the ash that blanketed everything. The distant flames cast an eerie orange glow over the ruins, illuminating skeletal buildings and twisted metal. The air was thick with smoke and the bitter taste of winter, each breath a harsh reminder of their dire situation. The soldier's mind drifted as he walked, each step a silent protest against the winter's grip. Around him Moscow lay in ruins, its flames casting an eerie light over the desolate streets. A stray dog followed at his heels, its breath visible in the frigid air. The snow crunched beneath his boots like shattered glass, and with every inhalation, the acrid smoke mingled with the biting cold, a constant reminder of their dire situation. The soldier's ears rang with the distant crackle of flames. Each footfall sent a shiver through his bones, and he could feel the cold seeping into his very marrow. A stray dog moved like a shadow at his side, its paws leaving small indentations in the snow. The air was heavy with the acrid tang of smoke and the crisp bite of winter, a harsh blend that made every breath a challenge. Flames flickered beyond the ruins, casting an eerie glow over the desolate streets. The soldier's boot sank into a hidden puddle, freezing instantly. Each step was a battle against the relentless cold and the treacherous ground. The distant flames cast an eerie light over the ruins, illuminating the twisted metal and skeletal buildings. A stray dog moved silently at his side, its breath visible in the frigid air. The snow crunched beneath his boots like shattered glass, and with every inhalation, the acrid smoke mingled with the biting cold, a constant reminder of their dire situation. The soldier's breath formed white clouds in the frigid air, each exhalation a stark contrast against the smoky sky. He walked through the silent streets where once vibrant life thrived, now only ashes remained. A stray dog followed his steps, its paws sinking into the snow with soft thuds. Flames flickered beyond the ruins, casting an eerie light on twisted metal and skeletal buildings. Each breath was a challenge, the acrid smoke mingling with the biting cold. The soldier's eyes stung from the cold, each blink a struggle against the biting air. The snow lay thick and unbroken except for his own tracks, which seemed to vanish behind him as if the earth refused to remember their passage. A stray dog moved silently at his side, its breath hanging like thin wisps in the frigid atmosphere. Beyond the ruins, flames flickered intermittently, casting an eerie glow over twisted metal and skeletal buildings. The air was thick with smoke, each breath a harsh reminder of the city's fate. The soldier's hands trembled as he clutched his musket, the cold metal biting into his numb flesh. The snow had turned to a brittle crust, each step cracking like bone beneath his boots. A stray dog padded beside him, its eyes reflecting the distant flames that licked at the sky. The air was thick with smoke and frost, every breath a battle against the bitter embrace of winter. Beyond the ruins, the city's smouldering heart pulsed with an eerie, dying light. The soldier trudged through the snow, his feet sinking into the brittle crust. Each step echoed with a hollow crunch, the only sound breaking the silence of the burning city. The flames beyond the ruins painted twisted metal and skeletal buildings in an eerie light, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts over the desolate streets. His breath, visible in the frigid air, mingled with the acrid smoke, each inhalation a struggle against the bitter cold. The soldier's breath hung in the air, a misty white cloud that lingered before dissipating into the frigid atmosphere. The snow crunched beneath his boots, each step a testament to the harsh reality of their situation. A stray dog moved silently at his side, its paws barely leaving marks on the brittle crust. Beyond the ruins, flames flickered, casting an eerie light over twisted metal and skeletal buildings. The smoke hung heavy, choking the air with every breath he took. The snow crunched beneath the soldier's boots, each step a sharp reminder of the frozen ground. The stray dog moved silently beside him, its breath visible in the cold air like wisps of ghostly smoke. Beyond the ruins, flames flickered intermittently, casting an eerie light on twisted metal and skeletal buildings. The city's smouldering heart pulsed with a dying glow, each flame a defiant spark against the encroaching. The brittle snow crunched underfoot, each step a laborious task. The soldier's eyes were fixed on the distant flames that danced against the night sky, casting an eerie glow over the desolate streets. The stray dog moved silently beside him, its breath visible in the cold air like wisps of smoke. The air was thick with the scent of burning wood and the acrid tang of smoke, each inhalation a struggle against the bitter cold. Beyond the ruins, the city's smouldering heart pulsed weakly, a defiant glow against the encroaching darkness. The soldier's breath misted in the cold, each exhalation a visible sign of his struggle against the biting wind. The snow clung to his clothing like a second skin, numbing his limbs with its relentless chill. Beyond the ruins, flames flickered weakly, casting an eerie glow over the desolate streets and skeletal buildings. The stray dog moved silently beside him, its paws barely leaving marks on the brittle crust. Each step was a laborious task, his boots sinking into the snow with a hollow crunch. The soldier's ears rang with the silence, broken only by the distant crackle of flames. His coat clung to his frame, soaked through with melting snow that seeped into every crevice. Each step was a battle against the frozen earth, the crunch of brittle crust underfoot, a stark reminder of their dire situation. The stray dog moved like a shadow beside him, its breath visible in the cold air. Beyond the ruins, embers glowed weakly, casting an eerie light on the desolate streets. The soldier's eyes traced the jagged silhouette of a collapsed building, its timbers blackened and twisted like broken bones. The stray dog moved beside him, its paws barely sinking into the brittle snow that crackled underfoot. Embers glowed weakly from within the ruins, casting an eerie light on the desolate streets. Each breath was a painful intake of frosty air, the cold seeping into his lungs with every gasp. The night pressed in around them, a vast and unyielding darkness. The soldier's boots sank into the brittle snow, each step a hollow crunch. The stray dog moved beside him, its breath visible in the frigid air like wisps of smoke. Embers glowed weakly from within the ruins, casting an eerie light on the desolate streets. The night was thick with silence, broken only by distant sounds of crumbling masonry and the howling wind. Each breath was a struggle against the biting cold, the frost seeping into his bones with every gasp. The soldier's eyes traced the distant flames that flickered weakly, casting an eerie glow over the desolate streets. Each step was a battle against the frozen earth, the crunch of brittle snow underfoot, a stark reminder of their dire situation. His breath misted in the cold air like wisps of smoke. The stray dog moved silently beside him, its paws barely leaving marks on the crusty snow. Beyond the ruins, embers glowed weakly, a defiant light against the encroaching darkness. The howling wind cut through the soldier's thin coat, each gust a sharp reminder of their desperate situation. He paused to catch his breath, his chest heaving with cold air that burned like fire. The stray dog pressed close, seeking warmth in his shadow. Embers glowed weakly from within the ruins, casting flickering shadows on the desolate streets. The snow crunched underfoot, a brittle crust giving way beneath his weight. Each step was a battle against the frozen earth. The soldier's breath misted in the air, forming a thin veil of frost on his beard. Beyond him, the stray dog sniffed at the snow-covered ground, its nose twitching with every cold gust. Embers smouldered in the ruins nearby, throwing feeble light across the desolate streets. Each step was a battle against the frozen earth, the brittle crust giving way underfoot like fragile ice. The soldier's ears rang with the silence, broken only by distant howls of the wind and the creaking timbers of collapsing buildings. The soldier's fingers trembled as he wrapped them around his rifle, the cold metal biting into his skin. He moved cautiously along the edge of a collapsed building, the snow crunching underfoot like brittle ice. A stray dog pressed close at his heels, its eyes reflecting the weak glow from distant embers. Each breath was a harsh intake of frosty air, the night pressing in around them with an unyielding chill. The silence was profound, broken only by the howling wind and the creaking timbers of ruined structures. The soldier's eyes darted to the distant silhouette of a horse-drawn cart, wheels grinding through the snow. His hands tightened around his rifle, knuckles turning white in the cold. Nearby, embers smouldered from half-burned ruins, casting flickering shadows that danced across the desolate streets. Each step was a laborious crunch against the frozen crust of snow. The stray dog moved silently beside him, its breath visible in the frigid air like wisps of smoke. The night seemed to close in around them, an unyielding chill that seeped into bone and soul. The soldier's breath hung in the air, each exhale a ghostly cloud. He pressed on through the desolate streets, the snow crunching underfoot with every laborious step. The stray dog followed closely, its paws barely sinking into the frozen crust. Embers glowed weakly from within the ruins, casting an eerie light that flickered across the empty thoroughfares. The wind howled like a lost soul, cutting through his thin coat and seeping into his bones with an unyielding chill. The soldier's ears rang with the wind's mournful cry. He moved through the ruins, each step a grinding crunch against the snow. Embers glowed weakly from half-burned buildings, casting flickering shadows on the cracked cobblestones. The stray dog at his side moved like a ghost, its breath visible in the frigid air. Night pressed in, an unyielding chill that seemed to whisper of doom and despair. The soldier's boots sank into the snow, the crust cracking like brittle ice. He moved through the desolate streets, each step a battle against the frozen earth. A stray dog shadowed his path, its breath visible in the frigid air. Embers smouldered from half-burned buildings, casting an eerie glow on cracked cobblestones and shattered glass. The wind howled around him, cutting through his thin coat with an unyielding chill that seeped into bone and soul. The soldier's gaze drifted over the skeletal remains of buildings, their frames blackened and twisted. Each step through the snow was a deliberate motion, the cold seeping into his bones with every crunch beneath his boots. The stray dog moved silently beside him, its eyes reflecting the weak glow from distant embers. The air tasted sharp and bitter, carrying whispers of ash and decay. Shadows danced along the cracked cobblestones, casting an eerie silence over the desolate city. The soldier's eyes scanned the desolate cityscape, each breath a struggle in the frigid air. His boots crunched against the snow, a sound that echoed through the silent streets like a mournful song. Embers glowed weakly from half-burned buildings, casting flickering shadows on cracked cobblestones and shattered glass. The stray dog moved silently beside him, its breath visible in the cold night air. Night pressed in with an unyielding chill, whispering of doom and despair. The wind carried the scent of smoke and ash, mingling with the bitter cold that clung to every breath. The soldier's hands were numb, his fingers stiff as he clutched his rifle. Night enveloped Moscow in an unyielding shroud. Embers from burning buildings cast a flickering light on cracked cobblestones. Shadows danced along the ruins like spectres, and the stray dog moved silently beside him, its presence a ghostly echo of life. Each step was a struggle against the frozen earth, the snow crunching underfoot with an eerie finality. The snow creaked underfoot, each step a deliberate struggle against the frozen earth. The soldier's breath misted in the air, condensing into small clouds before dissipating. Half-burned buildings loomed like skeletal sentinels, their frames blackened and twisted by fire. Embers smouldered weakly within, casting an eerie glow on the cracked cobblestones. The stray dog moved silently beside him, its eyes reflecting the faint light, a ghostly companion in this desolate city. The soldier's breath misted in the frigid night, each exhalation a cloud that lingered before dispersing into the biting air. His fingers were numb, his rifle a heavy burden in his stiffened grip. Shadows danced along cracked cobblestones, flickering from embers within half-burned buildings. The stray dog moved silently beside him, its breath visible in the cold, a spectral companion through this desolate city. Each step was a struggle against the frozen earth, the snow crunching underfoot with an eerie finality. The soldier's gaze fixed on the distant flicker of embers, his eyes straining against the encroaching darkness. Each step was a laborious effort, the snow muffling sound and thought alike. The stray dog moved as if in a dream beside him, its breath visible plumes in the biting cold. Cracked cobblestones lay strewn like shattered bones beneath their feet, while shadows clung to the ruins of buildings like mournful spirits. Every flicker of light seemed to mock his futile journey through this ghostly city. The soldier's ears rang with the distant echoes of collapsing buildings, each boom a reminder of Moscow's fiery fate. His breaths were short gasps in the freezing air, and his body shivered uncontrollably beneath layers of frozen cloth. As he moved through the desolate streets, the stray dog remained close, its eyes reflecting the ghostly glow from smouldering embers within half-burned buildings. The city was a graveyard of shadows, each step a struggle against the relentless cold. The night was a symphony of collapsing stone and crackling flames. Embers rose like dark birds from the charred buildings, casting an eerie glow on the cobblestones. Each step was a battle against the frozen earth, the snow crunching underfoot with a hollow sound. The soldier's breath misted in the air, his fingers numb within stiffened gloves. Shadows clung to the ruins like mournful spirits, and the stray dog moved silently beside him, its presence a spectral echo of life. The soldier's breaths came in shallow bursts, each one a cloud of frost against the night. His boots crunched through the snow, breaking the brittle silence with every step. The stray dog moved like a shadow beside him, its paws barely making an impression on the frozen ground. Half-burned buildings loomed overhead, their darkened frames silhouetted against the moonlit sky. Inside, embers still smouldered, casting an eerie red glow through cracked windows and shattered doors. The cold was relentless, seeping into his bones with each passing moment. The cold seeped into the soldier's bones, numbing his senses and slowing his movements. Each breath was a battle against the frigid air, the snow crunching beneath his boots, a stark reminder of the desolation around him. Shadows clung to the half-burned buildings like mournful spirits, while embers still smouldered within their hollow frames, casting an eerie glow through shattered windows. The stray dog moved silently beside him, its breath visible in the biting cold, a spectral companion through this ghostly city. The soldier's eyes traced the jagged skyline of half-burned buildings, each flicker of ember, a ghostly reminder of Moscow's fate. His breath misted in the air, visible against the cold night sky. Snow clung to his uniform, freezing layers into rigid armor. The stray dog moved silently beside him, its paws barely making an impression on the frozen ground. Shadows lingered like mournful spirits among the ruins, and every step was a struggle against the relentless cold. The soldier's fingers clutched at the remnants of a half-burned door, its wood blackened and brittle. The night air was thick with the smell of smoke and pine, mingling with the crisp scent of snow. Each step echoed through the hollow streets, where shadows played tricks in the flickering light of smouldering embers.